situations. For a long time, I thought that loving my father meant giving him total control over my life, my body, and even my bank account. Situations. We were told that protection was the same thing as love, but as I grew up, situations. I realized that the walls of the Town compound weren't there to keep the world out. They were there to keep us in situations. When Derek and I finally asked for the money we had earned from years of filming, the mask slipped. My father didn't see me as his daughter anymore. Situations. He saw me as a threat to his empire. In this video, I'm finally sharing the full, unaided story of the rift that shattered the Duggar family. Situations. We're talking about the secret contracts I was pressured to sign while in labor, the years of being shunned from family events, situations, and the moment Jinger and I realized we had to choose between our father's approval and our own sanity. This is about more than just a TV show. Situations, it's about breaking a cycle of manipulation that has lasted for generations. My name is Jill Dillard, and this is the real cost of my freedom. I spent most of my life as the fixer in the family. If there was a crisis, I was the one who stepped up. Situations, I truly believed that by being the perfect, obedient daughter, I was honoring God. Situations, but the foundation of that belief started to crack the moment Derek and I got married. Suddenly, I wasn't just a daughter, I was a wife. Situations, and we were starting our own family. I remember the shock of realizing that after years of being the face of a hit reality show, situations, we had almost nothing to show for it financially when we sat down with my dad to ask for a small portion of the earnings to support our mission work. Situations. The warmth in his eyes just vanished. It was like a switch flipped. He told us that the show was a ministry and that we should be grateful for the platform. Situations. That was the first time I saw the business side of my father override the heart of my father. Situations. It felt like the glass house we had been living in for decades just shattered around us. Situations, I realized then that my obedience wasn't being met love, it was being met with a contract. To understand why it was so hard for me to speak up. Situations, you have to understand the umbrella of protection we were raised under. In the IBLP, the father is at the top, and as long as you stay under his authority, you are safe from the world. We were taught that authority was absolute. If my dad said it, it was as if God said it. Situations. This created a culture where saying no wasn't just seen as being difficult. It was seen as a sin. Situations. We were trained to have a servant's heart, which sounds beautiful in theory, but in practice, it meant we didn't have boundaries. My sisters and I were raising our younger siblings, filming for hours and following strict modesty rules. Situations, all while believing that any spark of independence was rebellion. Breaking out of that trap didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painful process of realizing that God's love is not a cage. Situation that no is actually a very holy word when it protects your soul. The lowest point of our relationship happened during one of the most vulnerable moments of my life. Situations, I was in the hospital, exhausted, and in the middle of a difficult labor with our son, Israel. My dad showed up, but he didn't just bring flowers or prayers. Situations, he brought a legal document. He told me I needed to sign it right then and there to ensure our future with the show. I was in pain, I was distracted, and I trusted my father, so I signed it. Situations, it wasn't until later that Derek and I realized what that paper really was. It was a long-term commitment that gave my dad control over our image and our earnings for years to come. Situations, using my labor as leverage was a level of manipulation I never thought my parents were capable of. It was a turning point. Situations, I realized that if I didn't start fighting for myself and my husband, situations, we would be owned by the show forever. There were rumors for years about how much our family was making. Some reports said the show earned around $80,000 per episode. As kids, we never thought about the money. Situations, we were told the show was a ministry and that it covered our living expenses. But as adults, Derek and I started doing the math. We were filming full time situations, putting our private lives on display for the world, yet we were struggling to make ends meet. When we finally pushed for an accounting of the money situations, the response was cold. We found out that the checks from the network were going directly into a company controlled by my father. Situations, we eventually had to hire a lawyer just to get a fraction of what we were owed. We ended up receiving a one-time payment that amounted to a little more than minimum wage for all those years of work. Situations, it wasn't just about the cash, it was about the betrayal of trust. situations, it's hard to reconcile the Christian image our family projected with the reality of a father withholding earnings from his own children. While I was fighting the legal battle in Arkansas, situations. My sister Jinger was going through her own transformation in Los Angeles. For a long time, we were both so scared of the outside world, but Jinger moved away. Situations, and she started to see that the fear based teachings of our childhood weren't the only way to live. Watching her write her book, Becoming Free Indeed Situations, was so empowering for me. She didn't do it to be mean or to expose our parents' situation. She did it because she found a version of faith that wasn't based on rules and control. We started talking more, comparing notes on the things we had been told, situation, and realizing we weren't alone in our doubts. Jinger finding her voice gave me the strength to keep using mine. Even though we are miles apart, situations, knowing that I have a sister who understands the weight of that umbrella of protection and how good it feels to finally put it down has been one of the greatest blessings of this journey. One of the hardest parts of this journey was the day I realized I was no longer welcome in the home I grew up in. For years, the big house was the center of my world, but as our legal and personal conflicts grew, my father implemented a new rule. Situations I was not allowed to visit without his explicit permission. It wasn't just a boundary, it felt like a banishment. Situations I couldn't just drop by to see my younger siblings or help my mom with a meal. I had to ask, and often situations, the answer was no or came with so many conditions that it wasn't worth the emotional toll. Situations. It was a clear message that my presence was only wanted if I was willing to be quiet and compliant. Being treated like a stranger in my own family's home was a deep wound that forced me to realize that my relationship with my parents was conditional on my submission to their rules. In our family culture, situations. A wife is supposed to be under the protection of her husband, but my father expected Derek to fall under his authority instead. Situations. Derek started asking the tough questions about the network contracts and our missing earnings. He became a threat to the system. My dad didn't see Derek as a protective husband looking out for his wife. He saw him as a rebel who was leading me astray. Derek wasn't afraid to speak the truth, situations even when it was uncomfortable. He saw the manipulation for what it was and encouraged me to find my own voice. Because he wouldn't back down, he was painted as the villain. It was easier for my parents to blame the husband than to admit that their own daughter was unhappy with how she was being treated. Situations, Derek took a lot of heat to protect me, and while it cost us our relationship with my parents, situations. It solidified our marriage in a way I never thought possible. The rift didn't just happen in legal offices, it happened in the small, everyday moments. In a family as large as ours, the group chat is where everything happens: births, engagements, big news. But as I started setting boundaries, I noticed a shift. Situations, the ding on my phone became less frequent. I started finding out about family milestones through social media or news outlets rather than from my own siblings. Situations, being left out of the loop was a silent form of shunning. Situations, it was a way to remind me that because I had stepped outside the umbrella, I was no longer part of the inner circle. It hurt to see my sisters together in photos at events I wasn't invited to, or to hear about a new baby weeks after the fact. It was a lonely season, situations, but it taught me that I couldn't rely on a group chat for my sense of worth. Ovations had to build a new circle of support that didn't depend on my silence. When the producers of the Shiny Happy People documentary reached out, I didn't say yes immediately. I knew that participating would be seen as the ultimate betrayal by my parents. But I also knew that for years, situations, the narrative of our lives had been carefully edited to fit a wholesome brand that didn't reflect our reality. Situations, I chose to speak because I wanted to help people understand the harm of the IBLP teachings and the systemic control that goes on behind the scenes. Teachings, I wanted to validate other survivors who felt trapped in similar high control environments. It wasn't about attacking my family. It was about exposing a dangerous ideology that uses faith as a weapon. Standing in front of those cameras was one of the scariest things I've ever done. Situations, but it was also one of the most freeing. I was finally telling the story from my perspective. Situations, non-networks, The most recent chapter of this rift involved a very direct attempt to bring me back into line. Situations, I was told that if I continued to be disobedient or speak out, it would affect my inheritance. It was a clear final play for control using future financial security as a way to demand present day silence. It was a heavy realization. Situations, my father was essentially putting a price tag on my voice. Situations, but Derek and I sat down and realized that no amount of money is worth the cost of our peace and our truth. We decided that we couldn't be bought. Situations, we are building our own life on our own terms, and we are okay with whatever that means for the future. Situations, choosing to walk away from a promise of an inheritance was the final step in realizing that I am truly, finally out from under that umbrella. For a long time, situations, the boundaries between my father's will and God's will were completely blurred. In our world, questioning my dad felt like questioning the creator himself. Situation, it took professional therapy and a lot of tears to realize that my father is just a man with flaws, a man who makes mistakes. See, and a man who is capable of deep manipulation. The process of deconstruction was painful. It felt like my entire reality was being dismantled piece by piece. Situations, I had to unlearn the idea that my value was tied to my obedience. Therapy gave me the tools to see that a healthy relationship isn't built on power and submission. It's built on mutual respect. I started to realize that God didn't want me to be a quiet, compliant shadow of myself. He gave me a voice for a reason. Situations, learning to separate my faith from my father's control was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the only way to save my relationship with the Lord. The rift didn't just stay between me and my parents. Situations. It created waves through the entire sibling group. It's a complicated dynamic when you have 18 brothers and sisters. Situations, some of them reached out and offered quiet support, while others pulled away entirely. Situations, I could feel the fear in some of their voices, the fear that if they were seen as being too close to me, they would lose their standing with my dad. Two situations, there's a real split now. On one side, you have those of us who have stepped out and are trying to find our own way, like Jinger and me. On the other, situations, there are those who are still very much under the umbrella. Situations, trying to maintain the Duggar brand. It hurts to see that some of my sisters feel they have to choose between a relationship with me and peace in the big house. I don't blame them. I know exactly how heavy that pressure feels, but it makes our family gatherings, when they happen, feel guarded and superficial. The deep, honest bond we once had as sisters has been replaced by a wall of unspoken rules. In April 2021, situations, the world we had worked so hard to project finally collapsed for good. When news broke about Josh's arrest, it wasn't just another scandal situation. It was the ultimate proof that the wholesome image our family had sold was a facade. For years, situations, my father had prioritized protecting Josh's reputation over the safety of his sisters, and this was the devastating result of that choice. Seeing the headlines felt like a dark cloud had finally settled over everything. It was a moment of profound sadness, but also a moment of clarity. Situation, it exposed the danger of the umbrella of protection. It wasn't protecting the vulnerable, it was sheltering the predator. Situations, I realized then that I could no longer be part of a system that would cover up such darkness in the name of family unity. The arrest was the final nail in the coffin of our TV life. Situations, and while it was traumatic, it was also the moment I knew I could never go back to the way things were before. Every day with my sons, Israel, Samuel, situations, and Frederick, is a chance to do things differently. I want them to grow up in a home where their voices are heard and their questions are welcomed. In my childhood situations, because I said so was the end of the conversation with my boys, I want them to understand the why behind the rules. We aren't raising them in a bubble of fear. Situations, they are learning about the world and they are learning that it's okay to have boundaries, even with us as their parents. Situations, we are prioritizing their emotional health and teaching them that they are allowed to say no to things that make them uncomfortable. Situations, I want them to know that our love for them isn't tied to how well they perform or how quiet they can be. We are breaking the cycle of high control parenting. Situations, and seeing them grow up with that sense of freedom is the most rewarding part of this entire journey. To some people, situations, wearing pants or getting a nose piercing might seem like small things, but to me, they were monumental acts of reclaimed autonomy. For years, Situations. My identity was wrapped up in modesty standards that weren't even my own. Choosing to wear what I wanted was a way of saying, as I am in charge of my own body now, sending our boys to public school was another huge step. Situations, we wanted them to have a diverse experience and to learn how to interact with people from all walks of life, something we were strictly denied as kids. Situations, every one of these new rules in our home is a deliberate choice to live authentically rather than performatively. It's not about rebellion. It's about discovery. We are discovering who we are outside of the Duggar name. And while it might look worldly to some members of my family, to us, it looks like a life lived in the light of truth. In late 2021, while our family was still reeling from the arrest situations, my father made a choice that shocked almost everyone. He decided to run for the state senate. It was a move that felt incredibly tone deaf to me. How could you ask the public to trust your leadership when your own home was in such a state of crisis? It highlighted the fundamental difference in our perspectives. Situations. To my father, the image and the platform were everything. He believed that a political victory could somehow wash away the family scandals. Situation. But the reality of his home life, the legal battles with his children, the secrets, and the systemic control couldn't be hidden by a campaign poster. Chue's seeing him prioritize politics over the healing of his family was another painful reminder of why I had to step away. Situations, you can't lead a community if you are unwilling to listen to the truth within your own four walls. When I first started speaking out, I felt so isolated. Situations, I thought I was the only person who had ever felt this way about our lifestyle. But then the letters started coming. Thousands of them. Situations. I heard from people who grew up in the IBLP, but also from people in all kinds of high control religious groups who said, Jill, your story is my story. Realizing that my journey was validating the experiences of others was life-changing. It took the focus off my own pain and turned it into a mission. These people weren't haters or trolls. They were survivors. They shared stories of financial abuse, spiritual manipulation, and the fear of losing their families. Situations. Every letter reminded me that the truth is a powerful tool for liberation. It made the shunning and the banishment from my childhood home feel small compared to the good that could come from being honest. People often ask me if I've forgiven my parents. Situations, the answer is yes, but I've learned that forgiveness and reconciliation are two very different things. Situations, forgiveness is something I do in my own heart to keep from becoming bitter. It's releasing the debt they owe me so I can be free. Situation, but reconciliation requires two people to be honest and willing to change. Right now, my father still believes he has done nothing wrong. He still views my boundaries as rebellion rather than healthy autonomy. Because of that, a close, healthy relationship just isn't possible. Situations, I've had to learn to love him from a distance. I can pray for him and wish him well without allowing him to have a say in how I live my life or raise my kids. It's a sad reality, but it's a necessary one. Situations, you can't have peace with someone who refuses to respect your truth. When my boys look back at this time in our lives, I don't want them to see a family feud. Situations, I want them to see a mother and father who stood up for what was right, even when it cost them everything. Situations, I want them to know that their parents valued integrity more than fame or money. I am building a legacy for them that is rooted in truth, not performance. Situations, I want them to know that they never have to hide who they are to be loved by us. Our home is a place where we apologize, we're wrong, and where everyone's feelings are valid. By breaking the cycle of control, I am giving my sons a future where they can be whoever God truly called them to be without the weight of a brand holding them down. That is the only legacy that truly matters. So here I am today, out of the fold, out from under the umbrella, and finally truly free. It hasn't been an easy path. It's been filled with legal papers, family holidays spent apart, and more tears than I can count. Tuitions. But if you asked me if it was worth it, I would say yes every single time. My life might not look as perfect as it did on TV, but it's real. Sure, I have a husband who is my partner, children who are thriving, and a faith that is finally my own. Jim Bob's control may have been shattered, but in its place, situations. I found something much more beautiful, life built on my own terms. My name is Jill Dillard, and I am no longer defined by the Duggar name. Situations, I am defined by the truth. Thank you for walking this journey with me.